Now, there are just a few names most associated with French classical music, and one of them is Claude Debussy, arguably the composer that changed music in the late 19th and early 20th century. And although his masterpieces were written over 100 years ago, his work is still relevant and is still being performed. One musician who does just that is Thérèse Fahy, and she joins me now here in the studio. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Thanks for joining us. You're here in France to play a series of concerts marking the 100-year anniversary since Debussy's death. Let's begin then, before we have a chat, to taking a listen to you playing one of those performances. A beautiful rendition there of his music, and it's fair to say you're certainly a fan of Debussy. You've played concerts covering his work before. You've made radio documentaries about him. So tell us, first of all, what drew you to Debussy, and what was it like to play in the place where he was born?
Well, first of all, I'm a total francophile. I studied piano here in Paris a long time ago, and I came to Debussy really through the visual arts. At the time, when I was studying piano, I spent a lot of time in the galleries, and I just discovered Debussy, and I just wondered, it was just so beautiful and so evocative and so French as well, in detail and in concept and in architecture in every way. So I decided then to start playing a lot of Debussy, and then this year, because it's the 100th year anniversary of his death, I wanted to do something really, really special, and I was invited actually to play in the house of his birth on the day of the death, the 100th anniversary, which was, as an Irish pianist, it was such an honour. And so I made a sort of a series around that, and I commissioned 7 Irish composers to compose pieces inspired by Debussy, because Debussy had such an influence. You know, the whole idea of harmony broke down. Everything that was, I suppose, taken for granted in music up to that time was questioned. So these composers, these Irish composers, so what I'm doing in France at the moment, in Paris, is I'm playing Debussy, of course, and then I'm also playing the Irish pieces, and I'm playing, there was a Tombeau written in homage to him at the time. So I have now got this Ireland's Tombeau de Debussy. So it's a 3-strand idea, and there are 3 concerts at the moment, and I've just played the second one last night.
And I believe the last one is coming up
tonight.
So
yes.
we wish you lots of luck with that.
Thank you.
Now, if we talk a little bit more about who Debussy was, he was considered in his time a relatively avant-garde figure, wasn't he? Kind of quite a radical musician, or radical composer. Now tell us, what did he really change? Or I suppose another way to think about it is, if it wasn't for Debussy, what kind of music would we be listening to? Well,
I suppose in terms of harmony, I mean, he completely broke down, you know, at the time, diatonic harmony would have been harmony that was, you know, your major and your minor chords. And he questioned that, and, you know, at the time also, they had to be resolved. Everything had to be resolved, and there was a kind of a sense of gravity, a centre of gravity with major-minor system, and he just questioned all of that. So everything was just taken apart and unresolved in a way. And of course then he was very influenced, even though he didn't like to think of himself as an impressionist, and he really didn't want to be known as that. He would have been very influenced by the impressionist painters at the time, and so he preferred to be called a symbolist, and was he loved you know, otherness. He was very inspired by Mallarmé and all of these wonderful French poets, and then also travelling. Even though he didn't travel a lot, he travelled in his head. So he had pictures of the Orient, and at the time, at the beginning of the 20th century, there was a world exhibition, and lots of what we would, well, at the time, considered exotic peoples came from all over the world, and so he heard Oriental music for the first time with the gamelan orchestra. He heard the black music of the States, so he was influenced by jazz. He was influenced by all of these things. So, and that all went into this amazing new music that he, I suppose, created in a way, you know.
Of course, though, when it comes to classical music, your own interests do span beyond Debussy, beyond France. You've toured in the United States, for example, playing some contemporary Irish music there. Let's take a listen then to one of your concerts in the United States. perhaps to the untrained ear, doesn't sound like a completely different style of music. But tell us a little bit more about your own career. How did you get your start in music?
Well, I started when I was 5, and my mum, she was a singer. My father was in theatre. And so I suppose it was kind of inevitable that I was going to go that direction. And I started piano when I was 5, and then I won a scholarship into the Royal Irish Academy of Music in Dublin. And it took off from there. I started to win competitions and just realised that I really wanted to do it. It's hard, it's really hard. As a pianist, you're practising 7-8 hours a day at a piano. And you don't always want to do it, but you have to do it because it's like a physical sport, because the fingers have to be kept fit. And it's very important to do this every day, or else the speed and the agility just goes.
Yeah, and I wondered about that because I know you're also a teacher of music, and I wonder whether you think, is it possible for anybody to pick up an instrument and learn, or do you have to have some kind of raw skill underneath it all? I
think if you're young enough, I do think it's difficult for somebody to begin older because, again, the hand is already formed, and so if you can form it the right way with a young person, then that's okay. But yeah, I think if
perhaps
you're musical...
it's too late for me.
Oh, no, I wouldn't think so. You come to Dublin for lessons.
I would love to. But at least I wanted to ask you, sometimes I think for many people, classical music, it's seen as relatively inaccessible, perhaps arguably kind of an elitist form of music. Do you think that it's fair to view classical music like that? And if so, how do we change perceptions of what classical music is like?
It's a really relevant question because it's so difficult. I think people are afraid of it, which is why I like to get a chance to speak about it when I can. And I would love people just to step their toe into a concert hall. I had actually, I was playing at our National Concert Hall recently, and a woman came up to me at the end and she was crying. And she said to me, I've never been I've never come to a classical music concert before. She said, you've changed. She said, can I give you a hug? And I said, yes, of course you can. And I said, well, and she said, thank you so much. And I said, okay, I'll give you a hug on condition that you come back. You know,
the real power of classical music there, speaking very personally to you. Thank you very much indeed, Thérèse Fahy there, joining us here to talk a little bit about classical music on France 24. Well, it is